Hi there, and welcome to this edition of Colorado Conversation. I'm Christine Noël. So glad to have you here, especially for such an important topic that we're talking about today. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's a time to shine a spotlight on addressing mental health, fighting the stigma and education on mental wellness. And joining me today is Bea Stronz, a licensed clinical social worker from Guidelight Health here in Denver. Guidelight provides personalized mental health care, guiding individuals on their journey to well-being, which is something that's so important. Thanks so much for being here, Bea.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
This is a topic that when you hear mental health, there is a lot of oftentimes stigma surrounding it. So let's just dive into what is mental health? What are we talking about here?
Absolutely. So really when we want to get large picture with it, we all have mental health, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're going to have things that are better going on for us. Sometimes we're going to have things that are worse going on for us too. Really the big thing we're looking at is this impacting your life on a daily basis? And is this causing you a lot of distress? If it is, you might qualify for a diagnosis. People are probably pretty familiar with things like anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder, maybe PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. But at the end of the day, we all have mental health. It's just, do we want to get some help for what's going on in our head?
Yeah, and when do you feel like I'm okay, I have anxiety, but then it becomes a bigger issue, right? Because every day we're navigating stresses of just daily life. If you're a parent, you're worried about your kids. If trying to make it to appointments, those are all these things that really are demanded of our time that can lead to stressful things. How do you know when you need to seek help?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's a question that everyone has to be able to kind of come to on their own. A good general guideline to look at is, can I continue to handle things being the way that they are? Or do I feel like I can't do this anymore? I can't keep handling it. I can't keep living this way. When we're starting to have those thoughts or feel like maybe we can't get out of bed in the morning, maybe it's harder and harder to go to work, maybe it's harder and harder to play with our kids or to engage with like friends and family, that might be the time that we want to start reaching out and getting some help for what's going on with us.
Yeah, because there's some days where you're like, I'm having a hard time getting out of bed today. But if it's not the next day and the next day, then it's not a chronic issue that really needs a lot of focus. Like, everyone's entitled to have kind of a quote unquote bad day. But if you notice a pattern, you're not feeling like yourself, that's really when they say, okay, hey, I know there's resources out there that can help. And I think that is a huge message in this, is that mental health doesn't need to be this scary thing to talk about. Everyone has mental health. Everyone has bad days. Some people have badder days or worse days. And there are people like Guidelight out there to help, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what kind of other mental health focuses do you guys focus on and treat?
Absolutely. So we consider ourselves to be what's called transdiagnostic, and that means there's a little bit of something for everybody. So we don't necessarily specialize in one type of like disorder or diagnosis. We really have a little something that's going to fit for everyone, no matter what it is that they're experiencing. So we often work with folks that are experiencing like a generalized anxiety disorder, or like I mentioned, major depressive disorder, PTSD. We've worked with some folks with bipolar disorder, personality disorders. One of the things that I think is fantastic about Guidelight is we really try our best not to turn anyone away. We want to make sure that people who want the care are able to access the care. To anyone who's watching this that may have been dealing with something that's been hard in their life, and they're having a hard time sort of coming back from that, and they're like, maybe I do need to talk to somebody. It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone, you can speak directly to someone saying, listen, like, let's just have a conversation and go from there. Because you could look at it and going, how are they going to know how I feel? They're not going to understand what I've been through. And that's a big roadblock in trying to get yourself help if you're having, some struggles mentally, right? Well, and that's one of the things that's so powerful about group therapy too, is so many of us are sitting there and saying, this has to be unique. I'm sure nobody else feels this way. I'm sure nobody else feels this down or this incapable of doing things or this stressed or this anxious. And then you go to this group therapy program and you're sitting in a room with maybe 10 other people that are feeling that same way. It can be really powerful for people to know that they're not alone.
Well, super empowering to go, okay, if they can do this, then I can do this too. And to have that what's the word here? That group, like the compatibility in a shared experience, even if it's not the same experience, but to go, they're having a hard time, I'm not the only one. There is some comfort in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we call it like common humanity.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Everyone struggles with something at times, and sometimes we're going to struggle more, and sometimes we're going to struggle less. And being in a group allows us to see folks who are struggling more and struggling less, and start to find that commonality with them.
I have a lot of friends. We talk openly about going to therapy. If you've been to therapy in your past, or you need to go to therapy, there is a power in seeking help when you need it.
Absolutely.
If you need to get therapy and you don't get it, some people might be like, listen, like you need to take a look in the mirror and go, this can get better. It's okay to seek help. There's power in helping someone help you, right?
Well, and we know things can get worse when we don't address them, right?
Yeah.
If you had a tooth that was going bad, you'd want to address it. You'd want to go to the dentist. You'd want to get it worked on and get it fixed. If you break your arm, you're going to go to the doctor. You're going to get a cast put on it. You're going to get it fixed. But when it comes to our mental health, sometimes we're so quick to say, no, I'm not going to deal with this.
Right.
No, I'm not going to talk about this. I don't want to take the time off work. I don't want to take the time away from my kids, away from my family. And so we put it off. And if you've ever experienced that personally, you know it gets worse when you put it off.
Well, and the brain is such a powerful tool, right? I mean, the self-talk can be positive, but can also be negative. And if you start going down a rabbit hole and you start spiraling, which we all have at some point in our life, even if it was something small, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then you start thinking about it, and it just becomes like this monster in your brain. If you continue to allow that, you would know better than I would, that the brain is a powerful tool.
The brain is super powerful. Absolutely. I think we really underestimate how powerful our brains are.
Yeah, and talking about the group therapy at Guidelight, this leads to the theme of the mission this year, which is what?
Everyone has a seat.
Yeah.
Everyone has a seat at Guidelight.
Yeah, and we were talking about, you had mentioned, it's not like Mean Girls, like you can't sit with us. Like this is really an inclusive space where you're inviting people to come to the table and what? Do exactly.
Coming in for group therapy, right? So we do 2 different levels of care. It's called intensive outpatient or IOP and partial hospitalization or PHP, which are really big fancy words to say group therapy, individual therapy, and medication management. That's included at both of those levels of care by multidisciplinary teams. So clients are meeting with therapists regularly, they're meeting with a medical director who's a psychiatrist, a prescriber who's either a physician assistant or nurse practitioner, and then we also have client service coordinators who do a great job helping connect folks with resources that are going to help them with their mental health long term.
And this is all ages.
It is.
I mean,
so
mental
12
health.
and up.
Yeah, 12 and up. Yeah, so we're basically talking about preteen to adults. So really, you're here helping a lot of different people. And different walks of life, different areas of where they're at in their life, a lot of different issues. So I'm so glad you're here. Coming up next, we're going to talk about how to manage stress. I'm like, who's not dealing with stress, right? Something. So we're going to talk about how to manage that when we come back after the break. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Colorado Conversations. We are talking about mental health today, and I'm joined by, once again, our guest, Bea Stronz. Bea, thanks so much for being here and talking about this and diving into this. I know this is your life's passion project, helping folks and talking about mental health. And I want to talk about one thing that everyone is navigating daily: stress. From some stresses are little, some stresses are big. Let's talk about really what stress is and how it impacts our brains and our systems and the way we operate every day.
Yeah, stress is really any input that takes us out of homeostasis. And there are so many different things that can cause us stress, especially in our modern life, right? Whether it's work, it's school, it's parenting, it's balancing all 3 of those things. There's a lot of things that can stress us out. And I assume most people are actually probably walking around feeling like they're pretty stressed.
Yeah. No, we're just really stressed. Everything's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And then you're like, am I fine? How do we sort of do a pulse check? How do you manage stress? There can't be a one-size-fits-all, but what sort of tools can you pass along to people that are just kind of going through the I'm fine but not fine?
Yeah. No, there's definitely no one-size-fits-all, but the good news is everyone has a unique stress response that they have, and so they can have a unique stress approach to that too. So some people might notice that their sleep is really impacted when they're stressed. Some people might notice that they feel foggier, they feel like they have a hard time focusing when they're really stressed. They might notice that it mostly impacts their relationships. They might be quicker to snap at people or quicker to get angry about things. So the big piece is starting to learn, what does that look like for you? What's your telltale sign that you're getting stressed above your ability to really cope with it and handle it? And then what do you do about it? Big things are getting outside, reconnecting with nature. Some folks are probably going to hate to hear this, but mindfulness. Mindfulness is actually one of the biggest tools that we have to combat stress.
Yeah, what is mindfulness?
Mindfulness is a big fancy umbrella term for being in the moment. It's really all about just being present. And for a lot of people that can be a lot harder than it is just to say, right? So one of my favorite tips to offer to people, especially people who are really busy or feel like they're really stressed, is to set a 1-minute timer. I think every single one of us could probably find 1 minute in our day to
Yeah.
set a timer, to put our phone down, and to just sit there and be present with ourselves.
There's something that you feel like you have to be really intentional about that, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have time to scroll on our phones, we have time to watch TV, we have time to stress, we have time to do all these things, right? But you have to be, it sounds like, really intentional in taking a moment for yourself just to breathe, so that you're not honking at everybody on the road and causing road rage or whatever it is that you are somehow showing your aggression. Because eventually, if pent up, either some people will, kind of come in on themselves, or they'll lash out somehow, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually think driving in the car is one of the best times to do this, right?
Yeah.
So many of us are listening to music, listening to podcasts, the radio while we're driving in the car. Turn that off for just a minute and really just be present in that moment, and present and intentional, watching the road, watching the cars around you, maybe watching like the clouds as they're passing by. But even just taking that 1 minute breather can do so much for our stress.
Right. It is. The term mindfulness is just, it's a newer term. I feel like in the mental health era that we've been talking about, and it sounds like it's a really great idea if you just want to go, okay, I just need to take a second and be really intentional about that. And part of that is just being aware of there is this avenue to take, and you just need to make it, even if you're super busy, like just take a minute to help yourself. We were talking about how the brain is a super powerful tool, and getting ready for our interview, I was listening to a podcast, Mel Robbins' podcast. She was interviewing this neuroscientist, Dr. Ethan Kross, one of the world leading expert on the brain. And some of the things they were talking about were super fascinating. One is that our brains process 4,000 or think 4,000 words in a minute. Like, we're just constantly thinking and navigating a bunch of different thoughts and feelings, and sometimes you don't really know how to navigate them. But those words are super powerful, whether you go down a rabbit hole of negativity or you're focusing on something that's more positive. And I think what's really interesting about that is that what they had said in this study is that people, when they more so latch onto the negative feelings than celebrate the positive feelings. And that's just the way that our brains work. So we tend to go down a rabbit hole easier on little things that bother us than going, oh, I had like this great moment today. They're like, oh, that's just more normal. Maybe not normal, but just easier to accept than when something negative happens and you start going down this rabbit hole. Why do you think that is?
Our brains are hardwired for survival, right? So we're constantly looking and on the lookout for what is going to hurt us, what's going to harm us. And one of the ways that that shows up in our modern world really is these negative thoughts. We are so quick to find something negative, something that might be harmful, something that might be hurtful, and kind of latch onto that rather than really looking for the positive or looking for the good things going on.
Which I understand you focus on, our goal is to protect ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
So if there is this negative thing like, oh, my child could get hurt or I could get hurt or something, that you do everything you can to protect yourself, but sometimes that can go to the next level. And if you continue to spiral, you become anxious, you become worried, and then next thing you know, you're worrying about something that hasn't happened, which can be not great mentally.
Absolutely. Right. Well, and going back to mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is about staying in the present.
Yeah.
I know I've seen a meme kind of going around the internet sometimes of when you're stuck in the future, you're anxious. When you're stuck in the past, you're depressed. But when you're mindful, you're in the present moment, right? Being mindful really can be the antidote to depression and anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and we're both moms. For me, I became more anxious when I became a mom, because you do, at least for me, had these intrusive thoughts of, my baby falling down the stairs and all these things. And the more moms that I talked to, the more they were like, actually, I had those too. And so for me at least, becoming a mom made me a little more anxious. And I really had to be intentional about, okay, he's fine. You're fine. You know how to walk down the stairs still. You're not just going to be, your brain goes into these really hard spaces. But to just take a breath and go, okay,
well, and
everyone's fine.
Yeah,
everyone's fine.
What you actually just mentioned, that was mindfulness, right? Of taking that pause, checking in with yourself and saying, in this moment, he's safe, he's fine. In this moment, I am safe, I'm fine. That's mindfulness.
Well, good. Well, then I was practicing it before I even knew. There was no other way out of it, though. It was like, the postpartum season, and this is just my experience, it was a beautiful time, but it was also extremely hard. And when you're a first-time mom and everything is so new, just the change alone is, quite the experience. So, and I found that, it sounds like with the group therapy that you offer, finding other people that, can empathize or sympathize with the season that you're in really brings you some comfort and gives you also maybe some helpful tools on, the next time that you spiral or have anxiety or worry.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we really try to combo is really that group support and that group kind of cohesion and sense of community, along with the tools, actionable tools that people can use when they're starting to spiral.
And I want to talk about the tools because another point in this podcast, in a study they did during the pandemic, Dr. Ethan Cross did this study, and they were curious about what tools were moving the needle on coping with anxiety during a time that was no doubt really a unique experience and challenging for a lot of people. And they said that typically it takes several tools at once. It's not like one tool will help with the anxiety, but they found that journaling was the singular one tool when used was actually moving the needle on dealing with anxiety, but it was the most underused tool. And the reason they found that in the study was that because people, one, had to put effort into sitting down for 15 minutes and just going, okay, I just need to take 15 minutes because who has 15 minutes, right? But that's that mindfulness is taking that pause, but also it forces yourself to be vulnerable. But when you write down something, it forces your brain, when you have all these millions of thoughts going on, to put them into an organized form on a page, and found that to be really helpful for a lot of folks. I'm curious if you have seen that in your own practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, writing is a really powerful tool for a lot of reasons. I think one of the biggest pieces of the journaling, right, when we have thoughts swirling in our head, it's easier for us to spiral because it's all just stuck inside of our brain. But once we get our thoughts out, whether it's talking to somebody that we trust and know, or it's putting them down on paper like in journaling, all of a sudden it's not just stuck in our brain, it's actually out and it's somewhere else. And the best part of journaling is you're not getting judged for it, right?
You don't have to share it if you don't want to.
Share it with someone. You're not afraid of what's the reaction going to be. It's simply just for you. And sometimes sharing your thoughts to another person, you're afraid of the reaction you're going to get. Journaling eliminates that.
Yeah. So journaling, maybe taking a hike, talking to a friend, talking to someone who's in a safe space. Any other tools that you have to offer our viewers today?
Absolutely. I think getting back in touch with hobbies. Sometimes we like to encourage folks, what is something you like to do when you were a little kid? Is it swinging on the swings? Is it, like you said, going for a hike? Is it jumping rope? Sometimes those things can actually be really good for our stress reduction. It's just letting ourselves play.
And I think it speaks to that taking just a minute. Taking a minute for yourself. Even if you're swinging and you're just, your mind is for a minute just calming down, whatever that is, to give yourself sort of that reset and that pause. Speaks to the mindfulness. I love this so much. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back. Welcome back in. I'm joined by, once again, Bea Stronz. She's with Guidelight Health here, and we're talking about Mental Health Awareness Month throughout the month of May. This is a topic that, yes, we're shining a light on it in the month of May, but really this is something that should we focus on all year round, and this is what Guidelight really is. It's a great resource for people in our community and helping so many different people, right? And we talk about this group therapy. Everyone really is invited to the conversation, to the table. Let's talk more about that.
Absolutely. So we have a general track for our PHP and IOP for anyone that's really interested in receiving mental health care, especially in a group therapy setting. We've also developed a couple specialized tracks. So we know that there's certain communities within our larger Colorado community that have previously perhaps had issues with accessing mental health services, and we've tried to create some special options for them to be able to have an easier time accessing. So the two that I really want to kind of highlight are, one is called PRISM, and it is specific for folks that are within the LGBTQIA+ community. We're not, shuffling everyone into there. It really is just an option if people are wanting to be with other folks that identify similarly to them and wanting to talk about issues that are affecting them. And then the other community we've created a specialized program for is our Spanish-speaking community here in Denver.
Wonderful.
So that program is called Juntas Adelante, which means along the lines of moving forward together. And that's really what we're trying to do, give people an option so that they can move forward in their lives.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here in our community. I know this is something that it's a resource that's only going to help everyone in our community. And for people that may be watching this that have a friend that or a loved one that's struggling with more than just perhaps a stressful day, they're noticing a change in behavior, what is your advice to them in terms of maybe first steps to take in getting them help?
Yeah, I think first step is really to be intentional and check in with them, right? Sometimes we overlook the power of just that direct communication and being able to sit down with someone and say, hey, I see that you're really struggling. Can we can we talk about this? What can I do to support you?
Yeah.
I think after that, if you know, you're noticing that you're still worried about them, they're still not getting better, they're worried about themselves, reach out for help. There's a lot of professional help out there, and we are so happy to help folks in our Colorado community here at Guidelight.
I also think that we underestimate the concept of being seen. If someone just says, hey, listen, I see you, are you okay? Just being noticed. When everyone's so busy, no one's gonna care, no one notices. I don't wanna bother my friends, I don't wanna bother my loved ones. But people are there, they want to care, they wanna help. They're there to care, and the resource that you all are offering at Guidelight is really something that obviously I know we have a success story of a recent patient that you want to share. So this is really becoming beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we had a recent person come through one of our IOP programs who was struggling with just a lot of anxiety, feeling so paralyzed that she was having a hard time going out to the grocery store, was having a hard time showing up for her friends and family, was saying no to a lot more invitations to things than she really wanted to be saying no to. So she came to us for help. And she's actually been graduated from our program for about 2 months now. And so our therapist reached out to her to check in. And she shared that things have continued to get better in her life. That she still has those days where she feels anxious, but now she feels like she has tools and she has skills that she can use to manage those feelings. And rather than feeling like she's alone and she's doing this by herself and just trying to figure it out the best she can, she actually has a plan and she has a strategy for how to get through that.
There's a power in having those tools in your toolbox, and sometimes it takes making that first step to go, okay, I don't know what these tools are, I don't know what tools I need, and then getting that and having someone, or a company, organization like yourself to come in and say, here are your tools, and then you move forward. I mean, there really is power in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we say all the time, we're helping people stock up their toolbox. That's all it is.
We all need all those tools. For people that are just learning about Guidelight, where can we find more information?
Yeah, our website is a great place to start, which is just www.guidelighthealth.com.
Okay.
You can also call us at one of our local clinics, which is 720-730-2523.
And I'm sure that number is also on the website, which we'll be sure to link with this episode. Bea, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Any lasting comments you want to make to our viewers in terms of this, Mental Health Awareness Month?
I want to encourage folks to talk about it. Talk about what's going on for you. Be there for people when they talk about what's going on for them, because it really does just start with those individual conversations like we've been able to have today.
Yeah, I feel like I've had my own therapy session. Thanks for being here. Yes. Bea, thank you so much. And we appreciate you watching this edition of Colorado Conversations. Again, we air these Monday through Friday, noon to 8 p.m., and we appreciate you being here. Have a great day.